The buyout market almost fully formed. It's March. How can, if any ways, should the Pacers use it? Plus, Pascal Siakam's emergence. Pacers Pelicans again tonight. Caitlin Clark goes pro. We're talking about it all today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Friday. Congrats. You made it through the week, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, lots to get into. Pacers Pelicans round 2 tonight on the road for the Pacers. What are the keys for the Pacers to getting another win over New Orleans? We're going to talk about that at the end. We have a lot more to get to. Before that, though, Eddie Garrison from 107.5 The Fan and the Pacers Radio Network is going to join us as we start with a conversation about the buyout market. Today's March 1st, the last day a player can be waived and be playoff eligible for a different team. So the market's forming. What should the Pacers do with their final open roster spot? We dive into that. We look at Pascal Siakam's recent emergence and what it means for the Pacers. We look at Pacers Pels tonight, and Caitlin Clark goes pro. The Fever are about to be awesome. We have lots to talk about today, and we get right to it on today's Locked On Pacers podcast. He is back from 107.5 The Fan and producer for the Pacers Radio Network. It's Eddie Garrison. Eddie, it was going to be a Pacers show, and it primarily is going to, but then Caitlin Clark declares for the WNBA draft, and I watched an episode of Suits. I don't know if you've watched Suits, but a very key character got fired, and I won't ruin it, even though the show's 13 years old, and people probably should have watched it by now. I've had a crazy day, and I want to talk some Pacers with you. How are you? Has your day been as crazy, less crazy, more crazy than mine?
It's been about mixed. So I was at work when the Caitlin Clark news dropped. I was about to walk out of the building, and I was like, oh, snap. This is a bombshell at 4:30 on a Thursday. This is a little bit odd. And then I was like, you know what? Let's go. All in on the Fever. And looks like she's all in on the Fever as well.
Already liking tweets about the Fever, which it's very obvious where she's going to get picked. I enjoy the Fever having to play the line of like, we're going to investigate and pick the best option. Gee whiz. Yeah, great news for the Fever. We'll have plenty of talk about them to come, but this is a Pacers show. And today, Eddie, is March 1st, which is relevant to every team and the Pacers because you have to be waived by 5 p.m. on March 1st to be playoff eligible for other teams. Hence, the end of the buyout market will form at 5 p.m. today on Friday. So we can't possibly know what's going to happen in the future, but we can know most of it. Even just today, we saw Marcus Morris get bought out. Mike Muscala was yesterday. I'm missing one from today. Patty Mills from today. The players are at the end of the timeline of being able to strong-arm their negotiations if they would like to switch teams before the playoffs. And the Pacers happen to have an open roster spot. Here's the tricky thing about this, and we can talk about this in more detail. To me, Eddie, it's hard to look at the buyout market for the Pacers because there's really not an obvious need they have of a player that would be available, because someone good enough to actually fill a need they have isn't getting bought out by another team. Does that make sense? Am I crazy? Do you think there's anyone that good? Talk to me, Eddie. Talk to me.
First of all, I want to go back to the top for a second. I have not watched Suits. I've seen parts of Suits.
Oh, okay.
The problem, that's next on the things I want to watch, because right now I'm working on the Avengers series.
Nice. Okay.
I'm finally working on those movies. But as for the buyout market, I don't think there's anyone out there really that's going to make sense for them, just because like Patty Mills is a guard. They're pretty deep at guard. You got Tyrese, you've got Ben, you've got TJ McConnell and Nembhard, et cetera, Shepard as well. And you look at, the backup center position has been a position where Isaiah Jackson's been good when he's been productive and gotten the minutes. So there's not really a need for a backup center like Muscala. Sure, it'd be nice to have another guy that can stretch the floor. But I think when Jalen Smith is back healthy and recovered from the back spasms that he's been dealing with, will look more like the Jalen Smith we have seen through the majority of this season. And I don't know, it all to be dependent on who's out there and if any of those players are okay with being a veteran on the bench, kind of like George Hill last year, that veteran who can help coach up this young roster, who has playoff experience that can kind of guide them through any tough times they have down the stretch of the regular season. And of course, into the postseason, if and when they make that.
Yeah, so here's why it's tough to me. And there's actually been a very recent Pacers development that's made it even harder, right? Like looking at their past significant buyout additions, right? The first year of the Kevin Pritchard era, they got Trevor Booker, right? They needed a backup for that year. He filled in great. He played in the playoffs like 10, 12 minutes a game. That's all they needed. But that's something they actually had a need on the team. The second year they really used the buyout market was Wes Matthews. And that was the year Oladipo got hurt. And they had a ton of minutes to offer. So both of those years, what they could offer is playing time, right? Trevor Booker could play for the Pacers. Wes Matthews could play for the Pacers. That is typically something that is appealing on the buyout market. All the players that have already gone through it and signed another team. Spencer Dinwiddie is playing for the Lakers. Dalen Wright is going to play for the Hawks. Kyle Lowry is playing for the Sixers. Jordan Goodwin, Thad Young, Gallinari, they're all playing, right? They went to a situation where they are going to play. The other thing that can matter in the buyout market is money. Tristan Thompson got bought out by the Pacers and then got more money from the Bulls. Genius bit of move from Tristan Thompson that year. But money can matter. If you're not playing as much, money can matter. The Pacers do have a money advantage, but why are they going to pay someone who's not going to play for them, right? It's in an awkward spot. And so as I look at the buyout market, you kind of nailed the part that makes it really tricky. They're set at guard. No one better than TJ McConnell is getting bought out. Like not even close, right? At center, Isaiah Jackson, Jalen Smith, Myles Turner, going small with Obi and Pascal, you're not getting a buyout guy better than that. The only thing you could squint and think about is the wing, but one, they haven't really explored McDermott enough. So maybe you could get somebody better than McDermott. Maybe. We'll talk about that in a second. But the new emergence that I talked about in the last couple of games, Ben Shepherd might just be better right now. And maybe you're just willing to play with him. And with him, you also have the advantage of developing a young guy. So not only do they have to be better than Shepherd, they have to be worth not playing him, right, going forward. So it's really hard for me to imagine anyone they sign would actually play, like every game. Maybe you just want depth for the postseason, and then anybody would take it. So the only thing the Pacers have in their back pocket now that it's a stay to beat other teams is money. But for anyone that's going to take the Pacers' money, they're not going to play. So they won't need the money to get them, if that makes any sense. So it's almost like you're right that the only thing that makes sense to me is either someone who's okay not playing or someone who knows that they would be like the emergency player. But it's hard to find that guy too because they're going to maybe want a better situation.
Yeah, 100% agree. Like, I know there's rumblings about Otto Porter Jr. That's like the only player out there that could make like any iota of sense.
He's good.
Just because A, he's good, B, he helps defensively if they wanted to go that route. You know, if Siakam for some reason gets banged up or if Nesmith continues to, have to deal with these shin and ankle problems.
Right now.
Yeah, and Doug's hurt right now. So you look at it like that, he would be an added depth piece, and I think they'd be able to carve out some minutes for him, but I don't know. Do you want to carve out minutes for him and not Jarris Walker? It would be a very interesting look if they did it that way to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, hey, they gave minutes to Trevor Booker over TJ Leaf in year one, Eddie. You never know. So you're absolutely right. Like Otto Porter, had Ben Shepherd not been awesome the last name your number of games, but he's been playing since mid-January a lot. Like, had he not been sensational, you could say, hey, Otto Porter is just better than Doug McDermott, maybe. Get him for that and call it a day. You've got wing depth. But now you have Jarris and Ben Shepherd in the fold, so it's a little harder. So, like, it's really hard to find what the perfect piece would be. And Otto Porter hasn't even been waived yet. That's why I had to caveat that 5 p.m. Friday is actually the deadline, because the fact that he hasn't played for the Jazz yet makes me believe that he will be, but maybe he just hasn't found a home yet. And I don't know. So there's a couple there's good players who have been waived, right? To me, at least. Daniel House is one that I thought was interesting because he can kind of defend. He's a little on the short side though. But the thing is, there's a couple guys I actually like too who could be buyout guys. Lamar Stevens with the Grizzlies. Like, do they really need him? Although their whole team's hurt, they actually need him to play. But the other thing to consider is if the guy's not going to play and it's just a money thing, if you're the Pacers, I have two more things to throw you. One is, would you like to either just snap up some young dude who can't get minutes and has been cut, like a Killian Hayes, like a Kevin Knox, like an Isaiah Roby, a Casey Okpala type, Hamid Diallo, Stanley Johnson, or go the veteran route, someone who's not going to play like George Hill or Lance or something. Or let me present you option two that not very many people, including me, because I forgot, have talked about. March 4th is a deadline as well this season. It is the deadline to sign two-way players. That deadline has been kind of jumbled around in recent NBA seasons because of COVID rules and teams needing players to be available. But it used to be hard and fast in mid-January. Now they actually moved it, and it's a rule this year. March 4th is the last day, which is convenient because players waived on March 1st for the buyout market, couldn't clear waivers on the 3rd, and everybody can get all that sorted out. But if you've noticed, all of Woj and Sham's tweets for the last 2 weeks have been 2 years for all these guys, and that's part of why. So the other consideration for the Pacers would be if they're thinking, well, let's just give a young guy a flyer, they could convert Kendall Brown and give him like a 2-year deal with the second year non-guaranteed or something, and then open up a 2-way spot. That or Oscar Tshiebwe, I suppose, or Isaiah Wong, I suppose. I think Kendall Brown would be the most likely of those three, but that's also an option with that deadline being so close. So there's nothing that makes perfect sense, but to me, the only things that make good sense if the Pacers are going to fill their roster, which I think they should, would be someone really young who in theory you could develop, or someone really old who's going to provide you something that isn't playing time in the form of locker room juice or veteran presence. And I just said way too many words.
Now, you would be able to answer this question more than I can. How much money could they offer someone on the buyout market?
They have the whole room exception because they were below the cap this season. I don't have my cap sheet in front of me, so I can't actually tell you what that is without doing a quick hop on over to Google Docs. But it could be, in theory, a 3-year deal worth significant money. If they just converted Kendall Brown, it can only be a minimum. But it's a lot. It's like, I want to say like almost $7 million. Let me quickly get it up for this season. But yeah, they could beat like literally anybody. So the room exception is $7.7 million for this year, and it can be up to 3 years and $24 million. No one worth even close to that much money will be available, but they can offer up to that much, which is their way of beating other teams' offers.
Okay, what about Alexei Pokusevski? I know he got
already signed. He's on the Hornets.
He did? I missed that one.
You did. I love.
When did that happen?
Here's the thing about yesterday. Here's the thing about Poku. I used to watch a lot of him because he was so funky and nobody played like him, and so I loved watching him and loved him as a player. He was maybe the worst player in the NBA this year. They cut him for a reason. I like the Hornets strategy of just being the Thunder's G League team, though. But yeah, but that does fit the strategy of like just get a young guy, right? If you don't know what to do with your roster spot, a young guy who could become something. Guess what? That's how they got O'Shea Brissett, who ended up being important for 3 years, right? So that is also an option for them. Yeah,
I think the younger route is probably more likely if I had to guess on which way they would go. And like you said, Kendall Brown would be tantalizing. I haven't seen enough of him in the G League to be able to determine where he's gotten better, because I don't have the opportunity like you do to watch them as much as you do. But I would rather see them go younger than bring in some old veteran if I personally had my say in it, which I don't. But just because the roster's already kind of somewhat young, not really. I don't know. It's kind of hard to describe. Like, your important players are young, but your role players and like the key guys that you need to come up for you every single night, those are your veterans. So it's very interesting to see where they're at right now in terms of age and at the key positions in which they're young and experienced at.
Yeah, that is true. They have a lot of young guys who aren't playing, but if it's a young guy who wouldn't be playing anyway, who cares? It's like, again, Killian Hayes, James Bouknight got cut this season. I'm looking through the list of guys whose names I typed earlier. Jalen Noel. Who else did I type down earlier today? I think I've named all of them. So, and maybe more will wiggle free. But yeah, young guys in general make a lot of sense. So to me, it's either extreme. They're either going to get somebody pretty old or somebody pretty young, because someone in the middle is either too good for them or just won't even get bought out. And it's hard.
Is there a two-way guy out there that you have your eyes on? Like, hey, this person is a two-way, but they haven't, the whole contract thing with their franchise, they haven't, or whatnot.
It's hard to say. Like, if you converted someone, you would want to backfill the two-way if you're the Pacers, right? And maybe that's just another Madden's player like Pedro Bradshaw or Kyle Mangus or something. But, guys who have only played 3 years can get a two-way. Like, remember when TJ Leaf got traded from the Pacers, he got a two-way with the Trailblazers. So, like, yeah. James Bouknight could be on a two-way, for example. So,
fun fact, I watched or I broadcasted Pedro Bradshaw when he was in college.
I think he's good. He's probably not NBA good, but I think he's a good player. He's a delight to watch. I don't have anything else to add to this discussion, which is only relevant to say we'll see. This is perhaps we come back Monday and say, here's what the Pacers did or did not do, because I don't think they can do anything stupid. It's just they're not necessarily in a deal spot for basically like any free agent at this point in the season. Hey guys, short little break here so we can talk about FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets. That's a lot. With any winning $5 bet, again, $150 in bonus bets. All you got to do to get that is win your first $5 bet. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets straight on FanDuel, or live save game parlays, everybody's favorite. If you're already watching it, it's perfect. Exclusive props and plenty more on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockdown to get that offer. Again, $150 in bonus bets with a winning $5 bet. Shoot your shot on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Let's talk about Pascal Siakam for a second. I talked about him yesterday.
P.
Yes, that's right. Oh, I don't actually think he likes the nickname Spicy P.
Really?
Yes. I'm not going to. I don't necessarily want to speak for him, but that is something I believe to be true. That said, it is a funny nickname. Either way, he played awesome last night, put away the Hornets late, and is now just absolutely cooking. Since they played in Toronto, so the last 5 games, he's averaging 21.2 points, 7.5 rebounds, 4.4 assists, shooting over 50% from the field. If you go back to the game against Phoenix, where they won, and he was absolutely phenomenal at home, those numbers basically hold. And he's shooting 40% from 3 in his last 15 games for the Pacers. How have you seen him kind of get better and get more comfortable with the Pacers? Because I think that's been a big part of them sort of stabilizing and winning 5 of their last 7.
I think they're just all getting more comfortable with one another. Like, it just happens organically throughout time. Like, at the start of the season, you always talk about, when do you realize what kind of team you have? It's typically around 20, 25 games. And, you know, as you get game along and get a game further and a game further, of course, the chemistry between, you know, Siakam and the rest of the team and the rest of the team and Siakam is going to start to improve. And I think they're just starting to feel more comfortable slowing the ball down and playing a little slower than they were pre-Siakam trade. They're not playing up and down as fast as they once were, not as frenetic, but I think the offense is starting to stabilize again in terms of the efficiency like we saw early in the season. I just think that Siakam is having a better understand with how free-flowing the basketball game is for them offensively, that he can pretty much just figure out where he needs to go, move within the offense, because it felt like, you know, those first couple of games he would just be on the outside, just standing in a corner, standing on a wing, not really moving, not getting the ball in the post. Like, the game that I always come back to is that the game in Phoenix, and Tyrese is out in that game, and you have Siakam, and it's like game 2, I think, with Siakam with the Pacers, because it was right after the Portland game.
Yep.
And Siakam doesn't get a shot attempt like in the final 9 minutes or something in that game, or 5 minutes. I can't remember the exact number, and like the only real attempt he had was on a putback, and that was an offensive rebound. So there was nothing that was really designed for him. I think ever since that moment into the game most recent, that they've done a good job of letting him just kind of just be himself. Like, let him be Pascal, let him do whatever he wants. I think the one thing I'd like to still see more of is more pick and roll, whether that's with him and Haliburton, or maybe inverted a little bit with, you know,
Haliburton doing that last night. It was sweet.
Yeah. And Haliburton be the guy that sets the screen and has the opportunity to roll, because as we've seen throughout the All-Star game, I think Haliburton is fantastic as a three-point shooter, especially on a catch and shoot. And if you can create more of those opportunities, it's only going to help Bennedict Mathurin if he continues to be in that starting lineup, just because the spacing will open up the rim for him to be able to drive. And then, next thing you know, it helps out Myles a lot. So that's why I think, in connection to like Siakam and Turner, I think like those two work so well. But overall, I think it's just everyone getting used to each other, practicing too, and a lot of game time on the floor. So that's kind of like where I've seen. That's a lot of talking for me, by the way.
No, that's good. That's good. I always hog the mic. I don't like that I do that. So
it's okay. It's your podcast. I mean, I'm just a guest here.
I invited you here to listen to you talk about the Pacers. I would not have. I like that. Want to hear you talk. So here's you just nailed kind of something I fell short of talking about yesterday. I mentioned it, but like I think it was the Hornets game, the one they lost, and of course when they lose, you're going to be critical of everything they do. He took 12 shots that night, right? 2 games before that against the Warriors, he took 11. And that was kind of the stretch where everybody talking about the Pacers was like, can they get him the ball, right? And that happened in that Suns game you're referring to. It's like, hey, you just traded for like this really good player. Like I don't know what the sweet spot number is, but like it's probably 15 or more, right? And in 4 of their last 5 games, he's taken more than 15 shots. He's that good. Like his mid-range is efficient enough that you're comfortable with him taking basically any shot. And so what I think I've fallen short on when talking about him being more comfortable is when I talk about him getting to his spots, like he can shoot from anywhere, basically. He's not a great 3-point shooter, but they're comfortable with him shooting from anywhere on the floor. So not only is it him kind of coming to the Pacers and understanding what random action truly means. It's not random. They all understand what they're doing. To us, it is. But so it's not only about Siakam figuring out where his shots are coming from. It's his teammates figuring out where those are and how they can get him the ball, because it's not like he can just rip the ball out of someone's hands and then shoot if he's not getting enough touches. So I think it does go both ways. So what I was doing poorly, and I even asked this question to Siakam last night, is like, are you feeling more comfortable finding your spots in this offense? But it should have been like, how do you feel like your teammates are doing better at getting you in your spots? Because that's where you've seen the adjustment, is they're like, hey, this dude's really good. Let's let him cook a little bit. He's shy at least 45% in all but 1-2 games with the Pacers. Like, that's very good. So getting him the ball, he's going to be able to score from lots of spots. He's very good at rebounding his own misses around the basket, which I would like to dig into that stat a little more at some point. Like, his second jump's pretty springy. So all this stuff comes together, and all I had to do is figure out how to get him involved at the right level. And he's looked great. He's scoring big. He's passing is up. His assists are good. And he's hitting the glass really hard. It's been really impressive to see him kind of round into this player for the Pacers.
Yeah, the rebounding part of his game, I think, is the part the Pacers really needed a lot in terms of not just him as a secondary scorer, but like with Nesmith out too, you just needed that added rebounder, because that was their biggest bugaboo last season, was that they just couldn't rebound. Like, they were one of the worst rebounding teams. Opposing teams were really, really good on the offensive glass. And I mean, they've been better this year, not stellar, but it's still an added improvement with him. And I think he's starting to understand that, hey, I need to be more aggressive on the offensive glass or just on the glass in general, because with his passing ability, he can bring the ball up the court too. You can run the offense through him a little bit. So, I mean, there's just a multitude of things that you can do with Siakam if he's being aggressive, not only offensively, but defensively when it comes to rebounding.
Yeah, they get him. They started this. They probably started this before, but I'm slow and started noticing it on Wednesday against the Pelicans. But he catches at the top now, and Haliburton's like, hey, I'm our best shooter. I'm going to be the guard screener on this play. And he's still working on how to do the ghost screen like Buddy Hield was amazing at, but he's actually an okay screen setter for a guard. Like, he gets physical with the other guy. And that's like a panic if you're the defense. You're like, okay, do we go to Siakam, who's tall and can pull up from the elbow and can get to the rim, and like all those are good shots? Do we stick with Haliburton, who's a crazy good shooter? And they empty out the wing, so all of a sudden the defense is flat on the baseline at the back, so the rotation's coming towards you. It's easy to see. Like, that's all really valuable, and they've done a good job of kind of at least planting the seeds of what that is going to look like, I think, when those two are truly at their best. It's only been 20 games, like you said. I think that's a good point, too, that that's about how many games during the season. Like, okay, this is about what a team is. They could be record-wise, and we're at 19, I believe, for Siakam. That might be wrong. So exactly at that point. And they're already implementing new stuff and finding ways to pair their stars together. And I think that's not only important for their effectiveness, but also to see what is the ideal 3 players next to them. I think they're pretty close with the role players they have right now. But figuring all that out, too, because once they're perfectly matched, then it makes sense around them. So I've been impressed with that recent run, and I think if there's a reason for optimism about the Pacers going forward, it's that their stars are playing well with each other.
And I think the other part of this, too, that why fans should be optimistic is there haven't been many games where Turner, Siakam, Nesmith, Haliburton, Nembhard, or Mathurin have been on the floor at the same time, because, I mean, you trade for Siakam and Tyrese is hurt with the hamstring injury. He comes back and he's out even longer because he wakes up with soreness, and they're just like, okay, we want to play this cautious. And then Nesmith gets hurt with shin injuries. Turner's missed a time or two in between there. Smith has missed some time. So they haven't truly been fully healthy ever since the acquisition of Siakam. So as they start to get closer and closer to the end of the regular season, I'm excited to see what it looks like. I hope Nesmith is back, because I think in the pick and roll game that you were just describing between Siakam and Haliburton, that's another added element into the offense, because it's like, okay, I have to be cognizant, of Aaron Nesmith over here in the corner. So then does that open up, a cutting lane for like an Andrew Nembhard to come from the wing to slash to the basket for an easy layup, or Mathurin, or whomever's starting whomever's on the floor at that time?
Would you like to know the number of games that all 5 of Haliburton, Nesmith, Nembhard, Siakam, and Turner have played in together?
So Siakam's been here for what, 19, right?
19. Yep. Well, he's been here for 20, but he didn't play in that Kings game, so 19.
Okay, so I'm going to say 4.
Higher, but not by much. 7. The correct answer we were looking for is 7. But
does that count the Toronto game?
Huh?
Does that count the Toronto game? No, because Turner didn't play, did he?
Nope, Turner did not play before the break.
Okay.
It's basically the 7 with Haliburton on a minutes restriction. So
that's right.
It's not even a perfect representation. So yeah, as that number climbs as well, you would think that, especially with Nesmith being such a good shooter, they'll continue to look better. One more break here, y'all. We got to talk about Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. It's easy. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. It's demon time on Prize Picks. You can own up to 100 times your money. With as little as 4 correct picks, you can turn $10 into 1,000. Demons and goblins are the newest and most exciting way to play at Prize Picks. Squares marked with red demons and green goblins get you different payouts. You can up to 100 times your money with as few as 4 correct picks. It's simple how you play on Prize Picks. Player and stat types you select, you can get your winnings that way. For example, Luka Doncic, more than or less than 32 points. LeBron James, more than or less than 7 assists. Kevin Durant, more than or less than 28 points. That's the gist with 2 to 6 players every single night. It's a blast. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA with the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100 at Prize Picks. Daily fantasy sports made easy. Eddie, last couple things to get to. One is Fever related and Pacers related. Tonight, the Pelicans in New Orleans. No ESPN this time. It's very hard to beat the same team twice in a row in the NBA. The Pacers have split with the Sixers and the Celtics this season in those settings. 2 excellent teams. Embiid was playing at the time. I can't remember. There was one team the Pacers actually beat twice in a row earlier this season. They split with Miami in the.
Was it Cleveland?
They did play Cleveland twice really soon, but I don't think there was back-to-back games. Were they? I can't remember. You might have been right. Regardless, it's so freaking. Oh, it was the Bucks. Doy. It's always the Bucks. It's very hard to avoid splits, and so winning this game will be tough. The Pelicans will be motivated. They'll be at home. They don't want to get swept by the Pacers. On the other hand, the Pacers need every win they can get. If you haven't looked at the Orlando Magic schedule, person listening to this, please do. It is comically easy for the next couple weeks. So every win the Pacers can get that they're probably not going to be favored in is important. So this Pelicans game, I would favor the Pelicans, but the Pacers just beat them. They proved they can do it. What's going to be key to you, Eddie, for them to do it again against a team of that caliber on the road, hungry, and very good? Because, yeah, their first quarter was fantastic, but they were really wobbly for about 36 plus minutes of that game.
I think the key any game for them is obviously defense and rebounding, but I think the biggest one is you can't let Brandon Ingram get to the free throw line 11 times for 3 quarters. Like, yeah, that was ridiculous. Like, you can't let him get to the free throw line because he's an above average 3-point free throw line shooter, and most of the time he's going to make them. Like, those are easy points. You can't give up easy points like that when you're going on the road and you're trying to pick up, like you said, as many wins as you could possibly get. The other added element into it is, do the Pacers go small? And do you risk putting Siakam on Zion? That's the part of it that I probably would not rule out, because if Aaron Nesmith is back, I think he gives you that luxury to go small. Whereas if he's not out there, then you're still a little undersized, because no offense to Ben Shepherd, but he's not nearly as big as Aaron Nesmith, and he's not as near versatile when it comes to being able to defend multiple positions. And so if Nesmith's out there, I think it's a little bit more easier to defend Brandon Ingram, and he's not going to get to the free throw line as much, hopefully, but that's all remain to be seen. And can they contain the dribble penetration of CJ McCollum? That's another part of it. I thought Nembhard did a solid job through 2.5 quarters, and then last quarter and a half, McCollum started to get going a little bit, started to find his groove. But I think those are kind of just some of the things that you have to look out for today against the Pels.
Yeah, the front court matchups will be really interesting to me. Like, they only played Valanciunas 7 minutes, and I still have not looked into this that hard, but I don't know if they gave a good explanation for that, or if they've even given one at all. You know, Larry Nance played a bunch, and Zion would come in, and Myles Turner would come in at the same time, and they were trying to get all the matchups they could there. But I think that's not a bad. I mean, look, everybody's getting bullied by Zion Williamson. Like, this is not a knock on Pascal Siakam, but
No.
Pascal Siakam would get bullied by Zion Williamson, right?
Yeah.
So it's tough. It's a tough matchup for anybody. So you have to construct your lineup around that, whether that's another enforcer, whether that's just let's go crazy with all-out offense and try to make them make an adjustment themselves. It's hard. And the Pelicans showed how hard it is by forcing the Pacers to get Jalen Smith out there with Larry Nance as much as possible so they could play Myles Turner as much as possible with Zion. Like, it's really tricky. And they even played Obi at the 5 a little bit, right? Like, you just got to do what you can against that front court. I think you nailed it with Ingram. Like, he took more free throws in 3 quarters than the Pacers took the entire game, which is crazy. Like, they took 9. They took 9 free throws the whole game and they won, which is crazy. But he was just killing them in that way. No one else on the Pels was getting to the line that much. In fact, their non-Ingram players took 10 free throws, which is about what the Pacers took. He was the anomaly throughout the game. So I think finding a better plan to slow him down is going to be critical for the Pacers, and just, getting some Tyrese Haliburton going in some way. That's so hard to do because Herb Jones is that dude could guard me, you, and Tyrese Haliburton all at the same time. I mean, that's not a compliment. He could guard 2 Tyrese Haliburtons at the same time. He's having that kind of wonderful defensive season. Again, he was a +8 in 38.5 minutes, and they lost by 9. Like, that's how important he was. And so finding a way, even when he's out there, to get Haliburton going in some way, I think is going to be the other part of this that is important for the Pacers. And guess what? The 2 minutes where Tyrese Haliburton looked like Tyrese Haliburton is how the Pacers put the game away. So if they can have more like 15 minutes of that, that would go a long way.
I think McConnell was really big, just being able to get inside.
Yes.
Like, that's the other part of that. Like, the bench, if the bench can be as successful as they were against the Pelicans in the first matchup, I think the likelihood that the Pacers can win on today would be very likely, just because I totally forgot that it was airing on Friday. So my bad there. At least I corrected myself.
I do it all the time.
But nonetheless, I think any game, really, the bench is like key. And when you go on the road, especially in the NBA, your role players have to still play like they're at home, which is the biggest challenge, I think. And if you can get some sort of level of consistency out of them, then I think it gives the Pacers an even better chance.
Especially against a team that also has a good bench in the Pelicans, who are proud of their depth. Let's talk about the other pro basketball team in Indiana, Eddie.
The Colts? Oh, sorry. You said basketball. I'm sorry.
Yes, Mo Alley Cox. That's what we're here to talk about during the combine. Man of the Fever about to be good. Aaliyah Boston, all-star starter as a rookie of the year, unanimous, special prospect, and they get another one coming in Caitlin Clark, who announced she's going pro. She's already among my favorite players for doing the announcement herself, not through her agency, not through a newsbreaker. I'm Caitlin Clark. I'm effing announcing that I'm going pro. The Fever are going to be really damn good for a pretty long time now.
The only complaint I have is that it wasn't a video. That's the only problem. The only complaint I have.
No highlight.
Not much to the state of Iowa. Why didn't you at least do a video where you can show your emotions and put it to words, and not just have some graphic designer put it together?
She's breaking like every NCAA scoring record, at least major NCAA scoring record, and can score from everywhere and is electric. I don't know if she'll be better than Aaliyah Boston, but having them both together is going to make the Fever just unbelievably good. I mean, basically every WNBA team that's gotten consecutive #1 picks has gone on to win a title at some point. I'm not saying that's the Fever ceiling right now, but man, are they coming from a good point. And they could not ask for 2 stars who pair better together than Caitlin and Aaliyah do. I mean, it's just, if they draft her, they're gonna pick her. But I mean, it's
if Tony. I think the card was submitted like yesterday after they found out the news.
Oh, I also have to thank Caitlin Clark for this too. So Paige Beckers with UConn announced at UConn senior night she's coming back. She's not actually a senior. She's going to Connecticut again. And so ever since that day, I've been looking forward to the Iowa Hawkeye senior night for women's basketball. It's next week. It's either March 3rd or 4th. I should know this off the top of my head. Now I don't have to care about being locked into the senior night proceedings. I'll probably still watch the game because watching Caitlin is one of the great joys of basketball these days, but I don't have to care about her senior night. She's going to be celebrated as a senior.
If the weather is accommodating, do they move that to the football stadium again? There's going to be so many people that want to go to that.
My goodness, that's a great point. Yeah, I've seen her play twice in person, including in the Big Ten tournament in Indy a few years ago, and she destroyed the Hoosiers. It was a very fun game to watch, and it will be a delight to watch her with the Fever in Gainbridge Fieldhouse this coming season. I enjoyed the Fever having to toe the party line on their statement. If you would like to read Lynn Dunn's statement, I tweeted it out. It's very funny. They're going to pick Caitlin Clark. They tweeted their ticket sales package and tweeted they were on the clock right after she announced it. Very smart marketing work by the Fever. Haliburton and Siakam and Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark all in the same city is just... And
Anthony Richardson.
This is a basketball podcast, but yes, also Anthony Richardson, who actually apparently plays basketball, right? He's a hooper. Yes.
He's hooped with our good friend James Boyd.
I did hear that. That's how I heard that, actually. James played with him, and he didn't even plan that. They just showed up at the same place, right? Isn't that the story?
Yeah.
That's great. What an exciting time. Hope sells, baby, and every Indiana pro team right now is young and growing, and hope is selling, baby. It's an exciting time, Eddie.
I know the answer is obvious here, but what kind of ticket impact is this going to have, like Fever wise? Like you get to go to almost every game, if not all games that are at home, at least. How often do you think you see? I don't know. Do you think they open up the third level at all this season?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they averaged 4,500 last year, I believe. So like when the Liberty and the Aces were in town, it was pretty full, bottom two levels already, and that was with them being the 9th best team in the W. So I would imagine that, yes, especially because I mean Iowa's not. It's far, but you could drive it in a day or make it a trip. Like I mentioned this Big Ten tournament game I was at. I went to Tin Roof right before. Oh my God, I would have thought all of freaking Iowa was there. Like they travel really well already.
When they come in, or when they came, I should say, they're not going to pretty much anymore with the new Big Ten football, the way it's aligned. But when the football team would come here, they would drink a couple of the places dry. Not even kidding.
Yeah.
So they can pull back their beer.
Yeah, I think that they could. They might be able to fill the building some nights.
Also, I'd like to give a nice applaud to Connor McCaffrey for not screwing it up. Why not to screw it up, Connor? Good job.
Good Lordy. Yes, Pacers play the Pelicans tonight. Probably won't talk about it till Monday's podcast, unless something crazy happens. Pacers road trip. Pacers next 5 games. We didn't get to talk about this. We don't have time. Extremely critical. Crazy time in their schedule. 10 of their 15 games in March are on the road. But their next 5 is at New Orleans, at San Antonio, at Dallas, versus Minnesota, at maybe the biggest game left of their season, Orlando. Doing well in that stretch against pretty good opponents, including the Magic, would be huge because they don't have. I think that's their hardest 5-game stretch left, probably. So going 3-2 in this next 5 would be extremely huge for the Pacers. They really need to beat the Spurs. Which they no longer get the benefit of the doubt for.
I can't remember the 5-game stretch, but that West Coast road trip too, because you've got. I forget.
Timeout. That 5-game road trip that you're referring to is Detroit, Golden State, LA, Chicago. They're probably going to be favorites in 3 of those games.
I was mainly talking about the 3 West Coast games. I think we have the Warriors, the Lakers, the Clippers, and then you have Chicago, right?
Yep.
For some reason, the Pacers always struggle in Chicago.
That's true. Pre-Haliburton, they definitely did.
Yeah.
So that is true. That will be an important stretch as well. But by then, who knows what the Lakers and Bulls goals will be for the rest of the season, or the Clippers for that matter. I think a lot of teams are going to be trying down the stretch of the season, though. No game will be easy, including the Pacers games. Eddie, this was great. Thank you very much for the time. Where can people find you? What you have to say about pro Indiana sports, everything involved in your life.
Well, on YouTube, I believe this goes on YouTube, correct?
Yes.
On Locked On Pacers. You can see the X handle is at Eddie Garrison _. So there you go. It's EDDIEGARRISON _ for those that listen on the audio medium via podcast.
The preferred medium of Tony East listening to podcasts is audio these days. We'll be back Monday, most likely, talking Pelicans, Spurs, and everything in between, and any additions the Pacers made with the buyout market coming to fruition. Thank you all for listening today. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you soon.